Okay, guys, hi. I am here with Molly, and I'm here with Liz, and we are all speakers. We're here to speak at the Fair Trade Federation Conference here in Austin, Texas.
We're here.
I was just getting some really good speaker coaching because my producer, Eddie, for this podcast, the very first text I got this morning was, Jessica, let's go over one more time how to pronounce the singular of women and the plural of women. And
he spelled it out phonetically for you.
He spelled it out
phonetically. I really hope he sent that text at like 5 a.m. too. I don't know Eddie, but I want to envision like
he's a good man.
Middle-aged man laying in bed going, women. And like texting and like spelling it out phonetically before the sunrise.
No, he's such a good man. In fact, I text him back like, I'm so fried right now. I've been traveling too much. And then he's like, oh, whoa. Like, because I had told him, hey, if I sound kind of dumb ever, like, you got to have my back.
See, everyone needs an Eddie.
Everyone needs an Eddie.
Hashtag everyone needs an Eddie.
Hashtag everyone needs an Eddie. And so here I am. He knew I was interviewing. You guys both are, first of all, Molly used to be a stand-up comedian.
Well, no pressure.
Improv comedian and sketch comic. I did stand up like once.
Okay. even more. That takes even more.
So much.
Brittiness. Brilliant and wittiness, guys.
I'm into it. I'm into
that.
Brittiness.
I see you as Britty as well.
Yeah,
Liz.
Liz is pretty.
You're
Never
Britty.
called me Britty before.
You are so pretty.
So Brittyful.
So pretty.
I mean, you guys both have that witty, brilliant thing, and I'm the one who can't pronounce women.
No,
So,
you can be Britty and still say woman.
I don't know. I think that
Aren't you all
Eddie
about
might
the? You're
challenge
all
you on
about the
that.
and. You're all about
I am.
embracing the and. Brilliant.
Okay.
And I say woman.
I
now.
say
Yeah.
woman.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to introduce you guys really quick. We're doing a live podcast here of Going Scared here at our Austin office. And so Liz Bohannon is the founder of Sseko Designs. And Sseko is an ethical fashion brand that works to educate and empower women by providing employment and educational opportunities. Sseko enables women to continue their education and become leaders in their country. And Liz is also a public speaker. You turned your book in.
I did.
Which I cannot wait for that.
Last week.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know it was so soon.
It's fresh.
Fresh.
Still a little fried.
So you're in recovery.
PTSD.
I'm in, yes.
PTSD.
I'm like in the trenches, just like barely able, like kind of just crawling out.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's
And your hair's brushed. That's impressive.
Brushed, not washed. Small
Yeah,
differentiation.
I know,
but
that's
yeah.
Like
washing has gone way low on my priority list, so we are in good company. And I have with us here Molly Stillman, who has been a huge advocate for fair trade long before any of us even knew what it was, I think. And you have been just an amazing supporter of Noonday, of fair trade. And she writes for the popular blog Still Being Molly, which is a lifestyle blog that exists to inspire women to walk joyfully and confidently in purpose. She talks about fashion, beauty, recipes, her latest obsessions, and she's the host of a podcast that I think we both have been on. It's called Business with Purpose, which takes you behind the scenes with some of the world's most generous entrepreneurs. And really, your podcast has elevated the work that Fair Trade and B Corps are doing, social entrepreneur businesses. We've got so much nomenclature for what we do now.
I know.
Whatever it is,
Yeah.
you cover it, and just so appreciative. Thanks so much for being here, really. I know Molly's been up since 4, flying to Austin. Liz has got 2 babes. Your flight was probably Oregon to Austin is not okay.
We're not close to anything.
I know, I'm sorry. It's rough.
Except Hawaii. Pretty quick trip.
And that's nice.
We're going to own that. Yeah.
Own that. I mean, we're here, Southern Texas. We got Cancun, we got Mexico, but pretty much anything else, it takes about 10 hours to get out of the state. And that's okay. Okay, guys. So we are here for the Fair Trade Federation conference.
Yeah.
And tell me a little bit more, Molly, you can go ahead and start.
Yeah.
What has been your journey to kind of discover and own your place in this idea of fair trade? Or do you even call it fair trade? I don't know. What do you call it?
I think right now you have to call it fair trade and ethical fashion, but my dream, my goal is eventually those terms just kind of go away because that's how business is done. That's really my dream and my vision for it. I first learned about fair trade in the existence of that it wasn't coffee, tea, or chocolate in the summer of 2011 when I went on my first trip to Kenya and I toured the Kazuri bead factory, which is right there in downtown Nairobi. And that was the first time that I had ever seen firsthand what fair trade could do on a person's life, on a community. And so when I came home, I just dove headfirst into learning as much as I could. And I remember Noonday was one of the first brands I discovered. And I went to a trunk show. I went to this little like fair trade fashion party a friend of mine had thrown, and Noonday was there. And then another little like brand from Uganda was there. And I think Sseko was there. I mean, and we just had, this was early. This is late 2011, early 2012. And I just dove headfirst and just started learning as much as I could. And I just became so passionate about it. And I began to see the disconnect between, there just seemed like the ethical fashion and fair trade world seemed very like niche for a small portion of the population. And I didn't like that because I believe that it doesn't matter who you are, you should have access to being able to support these brands with your dollars. And so I wanted to kind of bridge that gap between sort of this almost cool kids club. I don't know. Does that make sense? This kind of portion of the population of people who are really passionate about these values, and then bridging that gap to the consumer. And so I just started talking about it and kind of how I was applying it in my own life. And I just love it so much.
I love that so much because I feel like a lot of people, and I know Liz and I, this is actually what happened to us. We went and started businesses to actually import and partner with artisans and empower artisans. But I love, there's so much power in your story because it really was just it's about advocating and using your voice and voting with your dollars, but then also saying like, I have influence and I'm going to influence other people. And there's just so much power in that.
Yeah. So much power. Because it's one thing for the makers, the people on the business side to be like, this means so much, buy our stuff. But then to hear it from you, like represent and advocate on the consumer side, you know, and just the way that you write and the way you style, it's all just so accessible. And I think one of the things that I love about you and the way that you've used your platform is you have a lot of people in the community that I think are a little preachy and like kind of like, I'm going to shame you into being a better consumer. And I think what you do that's so awesome is like, it's so whimsical and accessible and inviting. And it's just like, hey, this is what I'm doing. Come along, discover brands. Here's how you can style it. Which I think is a much needed voice in this space.
That like is the biggest compliment that you could give me because, and I really like that. I really take that to heart because that is something I have really been intentional about because when I started this journey, I felt very shamed in a lot of areas. Like when I first started out, like when I first got home from Kenya, like I was just newly engaged. I was still working to get out of debt. Like I wasn't married yet. I didn't have a lot of money. But this was something I was a new Christian. I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew this was something that my morals, my values lined up with. And I obviously have always loved fashion and beauty, clearly. But I really knew that it was something that I was passionate about. But I felt like if I still shopped at Old Navy, like I was going to hell. Like I'm just going to like, just being honest, because as I started to support these things, I felt like it had to be this either or. And that doesn't win anybody over. Like a shame narrative wins no one. And so I've really tried to come at it from an empowerment narrative of like, but look at the way that you can empower other people and yourself too with the way that you purchase things, and just start with one thing. Like it doesn't have to, you don't have to change your habits overnight. For me, it's been an 8-year journey of gradually changing my purchasing habits. And I still love Target, guys.
I was going to say, can we bring closure? Can I just say you're not going to hell if you shopped Old Navy?
Yeah, exactly.
I got to like bring it back.
No, exactly. But that's what I mean. And that's what I try to tell people is like, you do not have to be perfect.
Exactly.
It's not, but if you make little tiny intentional choices in the way that you change your purchasing habits, it's not only better for your wallet, but it's better for the people who are making your things.
I love that. Well, that comes across super clear. One of the things we say at Sseko is this idea of like, let's be louder about what we're for than what we're against.
Exactly.
And like, let's create a new path and invite people along with us in that journey, as opposed to being like, nah, that's wrong.
Yeah. It's just more attractive.
I completely agree.
More attractive. Okay, Liz. So first of all, what do you call it?
So here's an interesting evolution. I'm glad you've asked this, because for us who have been around in the space for a while,
we've called it a lot of different things over the last.
So I had a moment, like, I don't know, maybe it was like a year ago, where I was referring to our ethical fashion brand, and someone was like, that was so far outside of the space, was like very taken off guard, you could tell, and kind of laughed and was like, as opposed to non-ethical.
Exactly.
Which was an interesting indicator to your point of like, we eventually won't need these describer words, because we'll just assume that people are doing business in a way that's humane and good for people. But we've kind of evolved. We call it socially conscious, a social entrepreneur, impact entrepreneurs, a phrase that we use a lot. So I don't know. Pick your poison.
Pick your poison. I know. Socially responsible is something else that we've used. And then we kind of battled, like, do we say fair trade? Because I think people do often associate fair trade with coffee. So it's like, it's like there's so many categories that people have in their head. And so when you say something, it's like, what category are you going to slip into? And I feel like we're still finding our way.
And honestly, I think the fair trade thing for us, we're just going to go there, is that I think when we describe ourselves as like, oh yeah, we're fair trade and we source stuff from Africa, it immediately conjures up this idea in people's heads of what we are, that really, I think, holds on to this very old narrative of what fair trade is, what Africa, like, oh, it's going to be like crafty, or it's going to have this like, it's going to look like something that I like bought when I was like on a cruise ship and I felt good about it in the moment. And then I got it home and I was like, I'm not actually going to wear this in real life. And so much of what we're trying to do is really say, like, we want to elevate the conversation. We want to elevate the brand. We want to elevate the product. In my mind, if I'm not making product that, besides put the mission aside, put the impact aside, put everything aside, that you wouldn't look at and go like, oh my gosh, that's a fantastic bag. It's made out of beautiful leather. It's going to wear so well. It's multifunctional. It's going to fit great in my wardrobe. Like, at the end of the day, we're not going to create scalable long-term impact. Like, we can't be relying on our missions to help us make product and build brands that are less than like beautiful, excellent, on trend, innovative. And unfortunately, I think sometimes in the conversation, the like fair trade gets kind of lumped in with the like, well, you may not actually like it, but you're doing something really good for somebody. And one of the things that we say is like, we want to be product led. I want you to buy the product because you love the product. I want you to then become like a sold out community evangelist for the brand, because you're like, oh, I have this beautiful wardrobe and I'm making this incredible impact in the world.
Yes.
My very first trunk show, it's funny because, I didn't know it was a trunk show at the time. I just invited a whole bunch of people into my house to buy beautiful things to raise money to bring Jack home. But there was this one necklace and it was like crack cocaine. People had to have it, and it sold out. And that's actually what started the whole business model, because I had women saying, this necklace is gone and I need it. I want it. Can you get more of this? And I was like, oh my gosh, this could be a business. Like, there is actually a consumer demand here. And I think that is what each of us has really done for this space is, to me, the ethical part is the icing on the cake. The social entrepreneur, it's the icing on the cake. But you have to be consumer-centric, consumer-focused, and product-driven. And even as I look back over the last 9 years, I think about, because I was thinking about this necklace this morning, actually, and I was like, it's not really in style now. Like, that necklace would not sell out at a trunk show. And I was thinking about how cool that is. That's something that I love about fashion, is that it does enable constant creativity, because our tastes change and trends change. And I actually like that, because that creates demand for creativity when it comes to your product and innovation when it comes to your design. And actually, I just saw on Instagram this morning, the Joanna who designed, she was my first designer. She designed for us for 5 years. She was one of my first hires. She is now a freelance designer, and she just designed for a fair trade company that we know very well. And she just launched products for them. She just went and designed for them in India. And I was just so thrilled, because I was like, oh my God, this stuff is beautiful. And that's what is going to help elevate this other fair trade brand that I know has been shutting down stores, because you've got to be product focused. Okay. So Liz, I want to hear more about, I know your journey, but for those that don't, what has been your journey to ethical fashion?
So I would say I didn't know that was a thing. That was not part of my consciousness. I mean, I would say when I was in college, just to give you guys a picture of who I was this like very, idealistic journalism student. I wanted to be an international human rights correspondent. I had zero interest in business. I thought that if you were interested in business, you were just like greedy and you just cared about building up your wealth and didn't care who it oppressed. And I actually was not at all interested in fashion. I thought that if you were into fashion, you were shallow and had no idea where Syria was. And I was going to be over here saving the world with my words that no one would pay me to write. So those two things, it was just so far off my consciousness. And I moved to Uganda with my journalism degree, and I really wanted to learn about issues women and girls in East Africa were facing. And I met a group of incredible young women, some of the brightest women I've ever met in the world. And they were in between high school and university, and they tested into college, but they couldn't afford to go. And I was like, oh my gosh, here's this massive global issue, women and girls, and a lack of access to economic opportunity, education, all of a sudden just like shrunk down. And it was like, here's 25 of the smartest women in the country. We need to figure out a way to bridge this gap between high school and university so that they can go into college, become leaders in their community, ultimately our world. How to do that, I could have cared less about. So long story short, I actually started a charity, like a good, idealistic American who comes over and thinks every problem can be solved with that. And luckily I still had on this kind of investigative journalist hat. And so I just started asking a lot of questions about well, who's doing something similar? And is it working? And does it work 10 years down the road? And what are the implications? And my whole world started turning upside down. And all of a sudden I went from thinking oh, the only way you do good in the world is through journalism or social work or philanthropy to going oh my gosh, we need to be creating jobs, and we need to be building infrastructure, and we need to be growing the middle class and the economy and, contributing to GDP if we really want to be serious about seeing long-term life lift, which I was horrified by. Here I am, this journalism student who thinks business is evil, going oh my gosh, if it walks like a duck and it, employ people, make stuff so my journey, I very much so backed into it going dang, I think I got to start a business. And so
Why did I get a business degree?
Why did I get a business degree? Literally my sophomore year of college, came home, had my journalism major, and I'm like, Dad, I'm going to get a minor in women and gender studies. And my dad was like, oh, bless. He comes from a business background. He's like, really? We don't think one liberal arts degree is enough. He was like, could you just get a minor in business? And I was like, oh, clearly you don't know me if you think I would do such a thing. So I'm living in Uganda, and long story short, I started chicken farm. That failed. I'm not cut out to be a chicken farmer. And then I had designed these pair of sandals. Designed actually is a very generous word. I made a pair of strappy, scrappy sandals because I wanted a pair of flip-flops that didn't flop. And they checked enough boxes, and I went to the school and I hired 3 young women, Mary, Mercy, and Rebecca, taught them how to make these sandals, and then was like, okay, ladies, here's the deal. If you make these sandals for the next 9 months, I promise you'll go to college next fall. And they were like, okay. And I was like, okay. And I came back home and started selling sandals out of the back of my car.
It's not like the Michael Scott promise.
Okay, hilarious. I love you so much for saying this. Scott's Tots.
Yes, Scott's.
Okay, I joke. I have said before, the reason I chose 3 women as opposed to all 25, because my mentality was if I completely fail and no one will buy these, I can probably scrape together and fundraise and beg on a street corner to send 3 women as opposed to 25. Molly's referencing this episode of The Office where Scott goes into a bunch of
Michael Scott goes,
kindergartners.
He had gone years earlier and promised all these kindergartners
that he'd pay for them to go to college.
He'd pay for them to go to college.
50 of them.
And they all do it. They all graduate, and then he realizes that he can't keep his promise. And it's the line is something I've made a lot of empty promises, but this was the best one. I've made a lot of empty promises. So you didn't do a Scott's Tots.
I did not Scott's Tots.
Yeah. If you're an Office fan, you will love that reference.
Oh man, I think about that all the time. Yeah. I love that you brought that up.
I just knew there was going to be an Office reference.
I know.
With you guys, and I knew I wasn't going to get it. That's okay. I'm cool with that because I can
season
be
4,
Britty.
episode 13.
Yeah, you're Britty.
I'm Britty.
You're Britty.
I'm still Britty,
You're
even
so
if I
Britty.
don't have Office episodes memorized, you guys. Okay. Hey, thanks for letting me interrupt this conversation for just a hot second. If you guys have been listening to Going Scared for a while, I know that you are people that are committed to courage, you're committed to impact, and you're committed to entrepreneurship. And as you probably know, I am the founder and co-CEO of a social impact company called Noonday Collection. And the way that Noonday grows and creates an impact is through our ambassador opportunity. Ambassadors are social entrepreneurs who earn an income while also making an impact. And right now, I personally am looking for 20 social entrepreneurs who are ready to crush it, who are saying, I'm ready to harness my courage to make a difference in the world. And I want to personally invite you into this opportunity. We now have the opportunity for you to start a business for $99, which is so crazy and so amazing. For $99, you are going to get your own website. You are going to get a sample collection of product. You're going to get all of the training that you need. And I want to get to know you. So if this is something that you are interested in, if you already know an ambassador, then give her a call. Let her know. If you don't know of an ambassador, then would you please reach out on the website at noondaycollection.com, click on join, let them know that you found out about it through Going Scared. And I just can't wait to join you on this amazing journey. So something that is really interesting, I just got back from India a couple weeks ago, and I was there meeting with a bunch of different partners. And one of those partners is Tara Projects, who also partners with Modded Traders, and you guys partner together. So I didn't know all of that. But as I was walking through Tara Projects, we are just now placing our POs for fall. And a lot of our samples, y'all can relate to this, Liz definitely didn't quite execute well with this particular group. And so the orders that we placed were not as big as they could have been. But I'm there, I'm getting inspired. I'm seeing all these women who are just like, give us more work.
They want to grow so much.
I know. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, like we placed a big order, but it's just not what it could have been. But then I came across this one couple making this really cool necklace. And I was like, this is such a cool necklace. Who's this for? And they were like, it's for Modded Traders. And it was that whole, to me, the distinction of fair trade is that we are super transparent and that we are a community. Mm-hmm. And that it's never about having one artisan group be dependent upon Noonday, but it truly is if we can all be a community together and doing our thing. So that is something that is extremely unique to fair trade. When I think about I've never worked typical retail. I worked for a year in a jewelry store, ironically, many years ago. But I've never worked on the corporate side of retail, but what I've heard is it's like you sign your life away to not give away who your sources are, and you don't ever talk about your vendors, and you pay cash 90 days after receipt of product, and all of these things. And I'm learning about that as I'm, partnering with vendors that might source to more traditional retail. Mm-hmm. And so there's something so powerful about this community that it is a message of collaboration over competition. Mm-hmm. And yet I know that each of us is very ambitious women. I know that. And I love that about you guys. And there is always, how do we balance that tension of being ambitious, which is a little competitive, like that involves being competitive, and also collaborative, because you brought up I'm an and girl, and I am. But also it takes a lot of intention. So I'm just curious what your journey has been. I'll start with you.
It's funny, as I think about this, when I teach different blogging classes, or I teach a lot of workshops and speak to a lot of bloggers and content creators. And one of the things I tell them all the time is, do not buy into the lie that there is not enough room for your voice. Because in the podcasting world, in the blogging world, like there are millions of bloggers, there are millions of podcasters, but there is only one you. Like your perspective is unique. And it's not like with TV, think about, I'm just track with me here for a second. So like back in the 70s, if you wanted to watch one television show that came on at the same time as another television show, you could only watch one or the other. Like there wasn't DVR, there wasn't a way to consume both shows at the same time. You had to pick either or. Well, that's the beauty of Instagram and the internet and podcasting. Like, it's not an either or. I can listen to Jessica's podcast, and I can listen to another podcast, and I can listen to Jen Hatmaker's podcast, and I can listen to The Daily, and I can listen to all these podcasts and support them and encourage them and share them with my community because I love them. And it doesn't take away from my own. Does that make sense? And so we can be ambitious and encourage each other in what we're doing, because it doesn't have to be an either or. Like, I can be a fan of this blog and that blog. I can shop from Noonday and Sseko. Like, I can shop from all of these different companies because I love them, and I don't have to pick. But there's you see it mostly among women. Like, men don't really have that same mentality. They're just kind of like, oh yeah, that guy's doing that. That's cool. I'm going to go do my own thing. But women, it's like we have this innate thing within us where we feel like we have to compete with everybody else around us. And I think that that's just the enemy coming in there and filling our head with a bunch
I also
of
think
lies.
for a very real point in time, there literally was one seat at the table
Right, yeah.
for a woman. And so there was that. But now us here on this podcast have created a freaking stadium. We're building a stadium for seats for women to come and not sit, by the way. Don't sit in my stadium. Like, get up and freaking play ball with me and play to win, by the way.
Yeah.
And, so I do think that we're overcoming a history where there wasn't just a scarcity mentality. There was actual scarcity.
Yeah.
Because we didn't have the golf course to go play on and hang with the dudes and network,
Which is funny you say that, because so another fun fact about me is I played competitive golf before.
Yes, you did.
Of course I did, because
I want a photo. Prove it.
I know. I played golf. So my dad was a professional golf teacher. So when I turned 2, he sawed off a pair of clubs and he made a set for me. So I started playing golf when I was 2, played in my first tournament at 16, and played competitively through high school. I did not play in college because I just was so burnt out at that point. But I say that because I was always the only girl. And so I always had to prove myself, because if I was I actually did not make the varsity golf team my freshman or sophomore year of high school, even though I was better than the other guys, because my coach was just straight up, he was sexist against me, and he didn't want a girl on his team until by my junior year, I was too good to the fact where he was just like, okay, well, now she has to be on the team. But that was just one of those things where I always felt like I had to prove myself. And I get a lot of that from my mom. My mom served as an Army nurse in Vietnam. Wow. Like, when she came home from Vietnam, like, there was no support for women veterans. Like, she was spit on. She was called a baby killer. Like, she was, no one acknowledged her service. Like, nobody stood up and saluted her. Like, she was, she had to hitchhike her way home from when she was dropped off at the airport to where she was going. And people would pull over and throw trash at her. I mean, this is the early 70s. And so there was she had to claw her way to get any type of support or recognition for what she did. And so I saw my mom, like, as a young child, I saw my mom fight for those things, and fight for the rights of women veterans. And so I took that to heart, and I still, she passed away when I was a senior in high school. Like, I just think about, what would she want me to be doing? And she was the person who just elevated the worth of everyone around her. Wow. And she just, I mean, there's really no other way to say it other than everybody that came into contact with her felt elevated and empowered and encouraged. And so I've tried to take that into what I do as both a woman and in the business world and the content creation, whatever I'm doing. I want other people to feel encouraged and elevated and empowered and challenged and all those things.
Wow. That's amazing. I know this is your show, legacy. Jessica, but I'm just going to say, and that's a wrap.
No.
And it was really nice to be with you all.
Yeah.
No, that was awesome.
But I love that you just brought in the conversation a bit, because we are in a conversation so much around women, and that's so much of our passion. At the same time, at Noonday, we have been very specific to not say that we're just partnering with female artisans. We really are same with Sseko. I mean, you're impacting men. I just met some of them a couple of weeks ago. And so there really is a sense of family and empowering people and empowering the worth of people around the world. And what an amazing legacy that you are living. Thanks for sharing that.
Thanks.
I love the conversation about collaboration over competition, specifically for women, because it's like, oh, bless your souls if you're seen as an ambitious or competitive woman. That's like such an attractive feature that we see in men. And when we see a man that's like a go-getter and he's competitive and we're like, oh my gosh, he's going places. And that really freaks us out in women. And I think we have this misnomer that it's like, oh, choosing collaboration over competition means we all like sit in a room and just like kumbaya.
Yeah.
And I really think it's less about don't be competitive and more about like, well, who are you competing against and why? And so often I think, especially if we're operating out of scarcity and insecurity, we look at the person that's like right next to us or maybe a couple steps ahead and we start competing with them. And to me, that's a sign of like, oh, girl, you're dreaming too small. You know, like if you're getting so caught up in these, like, you know, whether they're vanity metrics or whether they're, you know, and it's like, I'm looking to the left and to the right going like, no. Literally what I want you to be pouring your life and your energy and your ambition and your innovation is like, we have a huge task ahead of us, right? For me, it's like figuring out how to elevate some of the brightest, smartest, most ambitious, by the way, women in developing economies into academia so that they can go on and be leaders in their community, the ones who are going to be writing laws into place that are going to protect land rights and women's bodies and all of these really, really important things. And then on the fair trade side, it's like, I think I read that fair trade represented about $1 billion in commerce last year, which is awesome. But retail in general in the US is like 6 trillion, right? So it's like a small
and that was probably including
percentage.
consumer goods like coffee.
Right. Oh yeah. I'm sure that was a huge part of it. And so it's just like, no, if you're buying into the line that it's like, oh, we're competing for this really small piece of the pie. I'm so much more interested in going like, how do we freaking make a bigger pie? Like, let's make a bigger pie so that there's a seat at the table for all of us, because it's just like, the work is too important and there's too much to be done in our lifetime and there's too much opportunity to each do that in a way that is, I mean, can you imagine if like, it's so funny to me that like in the fair trade industry, someone would sit around and be like, well, someone's already doing this out of this country. And you're like, okay, Adidas didn't sit back and be like, well, Nike already exists. You know, it's just like, there's so, I mean, whether it's in technology, whether it's in retail, whether it's in automotive, there's always going to be a way that you can create a brand, you can create a product line, you can create a story, you're connecting with your consumers in a way that's unique and in a way that continues to elevate and innovate. And I think the opportunity that we have specifically in this little tiny bubble of the fair trade, ethical, socially conscious, is to really link hands and say like, hey, I think we have a more similar than dissimilar vision of what the world is going to look like. So how do we do that together?
Capitalize.
How do we capitalize on that? And how do we be strategic about it? And it's exciting to me.
You say that we can compare ourselves to, someone who's a couple steps ahead of us. And I think when you're a big thinker, this is a true story. I think it was Khloe Kardashian released some makeup company the week my book was coming out. And I literally screenshot it. Was like, Khloe Kardashian, $1 billion in 1 week. And I texted Jen Hatmaker. I was like, Jen, Khloe Kardashian, like, my book needs it needs to go big or go home. And she was like, I can't believe you picked the most famous people in the world to compare yourself to. But it's to your point of like, I do see there is just so much more. And I still see us as so tiny. And that to me can cause frustration. Like that it can be a frustrating point, which can, I don't know, it can demotivate me sometimes. Because sometimes I can feel like, man, I've been pushing this boulder up the mountain for a lot of years. And I thought we were going to get at some sort of top where it would roll just a little bit. But I'm finding that it's still just like, we're still pushing. We're still pushing. But, Liz, you and I are direct competitors. Like, I don't know if it gets more direct than you and I. We have the same business model, a lot of similar products. But I think that's why I almost, in a way, wanted to have you on this podcast to almost disrupt that conversation. But then I think it's also the power of fair trade. It's just to me that we can, before I went on this trip, I called up another friend of mine who owns a fair trade brand. And I was like, hey, I'm going to this country. I know you've got some suppliers there. Can you make the intros? Like that would never exist. No,
never, ever.
But that is the power of togetherness.
It's
and
so
why
awesome.
I'm just so excited about what we get to do.
Yeah.
Okay, Molly, tell us a little bit. Like,
Uh-oh.
No. Nothing to be scared of. So you've been at this since about the same time as me, and you've seen a lot of change happen. So if you were to sort of recap the changes that you've seen in this space over the last 9 years, what would you say?
Oh man, that's a great question. I mean, I think, here's the best example I can give. So in 2015, so this is 4 years after I went on my first trip to Kenya. In 2015, I remember I wanted to find a central place online, like just a directory, a place where I could find brands that are either made in the USA or fair trade or ethical. And there was just nothing. There was nothing out there, no place where I could Google like ethical brand directory. And there was nothing there. And so I was like, I'll just start one. And it was scrappy. It was just like a page on my site and so I spent about a week doing, or even longer, just finding any ethical or fair trade brand I could find. And I put it on this directory on my blog. There was probably about between 35 or 40 brands at the time. That was 2015. At last count, I had to redo my site, make it searchable and taggable and all that kind of stuff, redo the whole directory. There's about 500 now.
Wow.
In 4 years.
That is crazy.
4 years. And so that to me is really telling. And then some of my nearest and dearest friends own ethical brands, like Bethany Tran, who owns the Root Collective, is one of my best friends. And we talk about this all the time. And she talks about like when she started the Root Collective in 2013, she's like, social enterprise just wasn't that common. And so she's had to really reframe her messaging over the last few years, because in the beginning she was marketing the message or the message of the business model of, well, we're employing men in the slums of La Limonada who are coming out of the gang life. And that was her big marketing message. Now she's really focused on creating a product that will get women noticed because they make amazing boots, which Jessica and I actually happen to be wearing the exact same Root Collective boots. And they're amazing. And so it's just like, but it's changing that narrative. And I've loved seeing brands have to kind of like what we were talking about earlier, where it's like you make a product that is beautiful. Like when you were talking, Liz, I was like, yes, I just wanted to like give a round of applause, a standing ovation, because I'm just like, yes, that's what I want to see fair trade brands doing, is because when you create a company that is resting on the laurels of like, oh, well, our stuff is ethically made, so you should buy it, that just creates a pity purchase. And that does not empower your artisans. And so like, if you're not creating a product that is beautiful and well made and in demand, then, you potentially are risking not being able to pay your artisans. Like, you don't want that pressure. So I mean, I think I just would say like, just in, like I said, the last 4 years from going from 30 to 40 brands on that directory to almost 500. Wow. It's just, that is, to me, is really telling.
I think it's telling about social consciousness and about entrepreneurship and artisan, but I also think it's telling about the internet and Instagram and how it's just become so accessible for people to find artisans and find sources. And then I think artisan businesses don't have the quantities of China, which are massive. And so there is a little bit of a low entry point if you're just wanting to like suddenly open a store on Instagram and buy a few things from another country. I'll say in my last 8 years, I could also list you so many artisan businesses that have gone out of business.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And I know that you could speak to that, Liz. So what have you seen over the past 10 years?
Artisan businesses, brands, companies. It's been a really, I don't know if you feel this way, but it's like, it feels like, and it's so exciting, also quite harrowing, right? Where it's just like I would say on the regular, we're hearing about retailers that we used to sell to that are no longer in business, little brands that we, maybe used to run with that have kind of shuttered their doors, artisan businesses. There is, to your point of the bar to entry is so low that there is kind of the danger, I feel like, of people being like, oh, this can't be that hard. I'm going to go in and I'm going to place an order for like 5,000 pieces of this necklace that this, artisan organization that I'm making in this country that I went on vacation is, and it can't be that hard to go home and sell it, without a real kind of understanding of how that can affect people along the way, right? So it's like, okay, well, that artisan group then went out and she invested money to make the product, and she likely was contracting that work out.
And she probably bought raw material more than she needed, and it's sitting in her workshop.
Totally. And there's all of these things, and then people get back and they're like, oh, okay, I can sell a batch of anything once, but building a brand is really freaking hard. Yeah. And so there is kind of this interesting, as it becomes more common, I think we do need to probably get a little bit more serious about our education and resources of how do we do this in a way. And I am all about like, just do the thing. It's never going to be perfect. Like everything is iterative. So do the thing and then build on it. But I think that there is a level of resource and responsibility that we have to start entering into the conversation. But I will just say that it's like any business, fair trade or not, in the fashion accessories, it is brutal. I mean, it is just like, I think the statistics of general business is hard, but if you're in the like fair, or if you're in the
I think it's
fashion,
4%.
it's like it's in
rate,
it's in the business. Single digits, low end of the single digits.
Yeah.
And then our industry specifically is incredibly competitive, and that's not just fair trade companies competing. It's just like you're competing with massive mass market designers. And so I think it's exciting because it's like
there's never a dull day.
There's never a dull day. And what you were talking about of just constantly feeling like you're pushing the boulder up the mountain, I totally feel that way. Can we just talk about this? I really dislike hearing silver bullet stories. I was in the car the other day and I heard a silver bullet. It was about a comedian, and she was like, I just like wasn't really into comedy. And then I like went to a club and I did this bit, and then it made it on YouTube, and then it went viral. And I literally in my car was like, I don't want to hear that story because they're so rare, and yet they lodge themselves into our consciousness.
They have lodged.
They do. It's silver bullet disease.
It is.
That we're all running around going like, there's a silver bullet. I just got to find it. I just got to find it. And once I find the silver bullet, everything's going to work and everything's going to be easy. And it makes us feel like what we're doing isn't right because it's not the silver bullet.
Or it doesn't matter. And instead, like, trying to stop myself in the moment where it's like I'm sweating and I'm heaving and I'm pushing the boulder up the mountain and I'm going, I thought by now I would, it would start to roll. And then having these moments where I step back and I go, oh my gosh, we're still here. We're still here. 10 years in, this scrappy little sandal company that a 22-year-old journalism student started against all odds with product that wasn't great, with zero systems to support it. Like, we're still here and we're growing and we're making even more beautiful product, and people are becoming a part, and just like taking these moments to sit back and say like, oh my gosh, we're still here, and celebrate just that accomplishment in and of itself, because there are a lot of people that can't say that. So I know, but man, this is my perpetual conversation. I think it's probably a personality thing too. Like, don't you? Like, I think that when you think so big, it is, because I might have this conversation with a friend who doesn't struggle with this, and she's like, just look what you built. And I'm like, no, look what still has not been built.
I'm so with you. That's why I do feel like friends that are shared personalities are important. Because when someone who's running as hard as I am and who is dreaming as big as I am kind of calls me into that, then I feel like I can listen. If it's someone that feels kind of more on they're not necessarily, and they see what I've done and they're like, oh my gosh, but that's so amazing. I'm like, no. But you don't see the whole big picture.
When I first met you, you actually said something when we had lunch in Portland a few years ago. And it was so good, because I was like, man, I was sharing, I was like, I was so angsty in my 20s, and I was really impressed because I feel a lot older than you. I am older than you. And I was just so impressed that in your 20s, you were already like knew exactly where you're going, where I didn't start Noonday until I was 35. I had a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 2.5-year-old on the way. And it was just crazy. And you were just like already starting your journey in your 20s. And I was like, I was just so angsty. And you're like, yeah, usually people like us, when we think we can actually change the world, and there's like a point, but there's a gap between that feeling and then actually what you're doing. Like, there's a little bit of angst there. I was like, yeah, you're right. Because we're actually psycho enough to believe that we are.
And it's a delusion that it's like, I never want to be cured from. You know, what I say that a visionary is someone that sees the gap between the way things are and the way things could be. And they're the person that says like, here's the difference. And like, come with me, help me build the bridge. I don't care. Bring your dump truck, bring a plastic hammer, but like, it's bigger than me. And so we have to be in on this together, or we're never going to make it.
Okay. I have to bring up this point. And I know, Molly, you've been to some Noonday collection trunk shows. You're friends with Noonday collection ambassadors. Liz, you guys have the fellows program, which is very similar. And I just have to kind of bring it all back to the business model that we talked about, how the barrier to entry is, often very short, but then the actual staying power and then thinking about your long-term impact, you don't think about that at the beginning. And that's what I love about our business model, as we get to offer a business in a box to other women so that they can actually be a part of this long-term vision, as opposed to saying like, yeah, go out and find an artisan, like building a brand is so hard. So why not just partner with a brand that like you love the aesthetic, you love the mission, they're in it to win it for the long term, so that like I might just do this for a season, I might just do this for a few years, but like Noonday is going to be there forever, so you can feel really good about I know Sseko's the same way, so just had to bring it back.
Yeah, no, I love that. I used to get really frustrated with the micro enterprise conversation. I believe that there's absolutely a place for micro enterprise, but the like, give a woman a $50 loan and she's going to go start a business, and it's like, you would never walk into just a room of 100 women in the US and assume that they're all entrepreneurs. That assume that if I give you $50, you're going to be able to get a return on your investment and have the mind and the risk tolerance and the idea to actually be able to put that in place. And which is why we think it's really important to be creating workplaces for people that just want a steady job where they can grow from within and where they can get paid fairly and grow their own skills. But it's same in the US. That there's a lot of women that are like, I love the idea of social enterprise, but I don't have a product. I can't go move and start a manufacturing company. Like I can't do brand. And so, yeah, absolutely saying like, okay, take what we've built, but you can speak to people in a way that we can't. Your story will touch a woman that like me from our corporate, offices won't be able to make that impact. We won't be able to make that relationship. Like you have a special sauce, but instead of going out and trying to recreate it on your own, if you are, that's awesome, but you're a rare bird. You're one in 100 people that are going to go out and do that. Yeah. For the rest of us, let's link arms and do that together.
Yeah. Which is awesome. Yeah. Okay. So Molly, we talked a little bit about where we've come from, and you talked about going from, was it 40 businesses at first?
Yeah, it was like 40 businesses
40
on the
to
directory.
500.
So 500.
Where do you see this movement going, like in the future?
So my dream, and I think I mentioned this before we started recording even, is just that my dream is that, just thinking about the fact that this is the 25th anniversary of the Fair Trade Federation conference, or the Fair Trade Federation, that in the next 25 years, like I want the term fair trade to be gone, like it to just cease to exist, because that is just how business is done. And what I have been saying for the last couple of years is I really do think that in the next 5 to 10 to 15 years, we're going to see what we saw with food in the fashion and purchase and product industry. Like where 10 years ago, 12 years ago, like nobody really was talking about organic and GMO and farm to table. Like that just wasn't, that just wasn't the conversation. And now everybody's talking about farm to table and everybody's talking about organic and GMO and all these kinds of things. And it's like, we've gone back to the way our grandparents ate. You know what I mean? And so it's like, we swung the pendulum in the 90s to all of the Kraft macaroni and cheese and Dunkaroos.
Bagel
and
Bites. I just want to say I'm still here for Bagel Bites. If Bagel Bites is listening, hashtag sponsored post. Hashtag I will be your brand ambassador.
Bagel Bites. But like, it's okay. We swung the pendulum in the 90s, and then everybody's like, whoop, 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 whoop. We don't want to do that. We don't want to do that. And so we were coming back. And so now it's getting back to the way our grandparents ate. And I think about like, that is how I see the future of the fashion and product industry. It's like going almost back to the way our grandparents purchased things. And it's like, they purchased things because they were high quality and they lasted, and they bought a dress, and when it got a rip, they fixed it. Like, what a novel concept. What a novel concept to replace a missing button instead of just like running out and buying another one. But I really think that as we see more and more brands, I mean, just this year, in the last 6 months, we've seen J. Crew and Madewell launch fair trade certified
denim. Which has been awesome. We need to go get a pair.
Athleta become a certified B Corporation. Athleta is owned by Gap. Target has partnered with IJM. Like, these are big companies that are standing up and saying like, hey, you know what? We see a problem. Consumers are standing up. Businesses are starting to make a change. And I think we're going to see a pendulum swing the other way.
And we're going to be leading the charge. Exactly. So are all of you people listening right now.
That's my dream. That's my vision.
Well, thanks so much for coming on the show today. And we can find both of you guys. Molly, where can we find you and hang out with you and learn from you?
So stillbeingmolly.com is my internet home, and I'm at stillbeingmolly. And then the podcast is Business with Purpose, and you can find it wherever you listen to podcasts.
Awesome. Liz, when does your book come out? You said you just turned in the manuscript.
It comes out in October.
Oh my goodness.
Okay.
Yeah, it launches this fall.
Wow.
So you can stay up to date on that. You can find me on the socials, just at Liz Bohannon. And then Sseko, which is Sseko Designs.com, and on all the social interwebs.
Have you revealed your title yet?
I have.
What is it?
I haven't.
Oh, you haven't!
I haven't publicly.
This won't be your space to do that, but anyway.
But it's
Okay.
out there, and I just got the final cover.
Oh, you did?
I'll show it to you guys.
I wanna
Yes.
see
I'm really
Secrets.
excited. It has been.
Secrets.
I mean, you know this. We
Yeah.
could talk forever about the process of writing a book, but it was the hardest, scariest, most mind-trippy thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
But now that it's out in the world, it's okay. Now it's
Now you gotta
another
launch
chapter.
it. Honestly, that was the...
Don't tell me that.
You
Don't
heard
tell me
about
that.
the Khloe
Tell
Kardashian
me
comment, okay? I am messed up, okay? We are both psychotic, so I'm just telling you right now, Liz, that the launching part to me, a lot harder.
I love it.
Okay, thanks for coming on, guys.
Thanks for having us.